They laughed when Paul married Tasha, a poor black woman chasing impossible dreams, certain he was throwing his future away. However, years later, those same people watched in envy as their lives transformed into something remarkable. What happened to turn their love story into the fairy tale everyone now desires? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Paul wiped his hands on his apron, a contented smile on his lips as he looked around his busy restaurant. The aroma of sizzling burgers and fresh-cut fries permeated the air, mixing with his customers' happy talk. This place was his pride and pleasure, created from the ground up through hard labor and devotion. "Order up," Paul exclaimed as Marge, his longtime waitress, rushed past with a tray full of sizzling plates. Paul nodded, his eyes crinkled at the corners. "Coming right up, Marge," he announced, going to take the order. The bell above the door rang, and Paul looked up. His attention fell on a young woman he hadn't seen before. She was tall and slim, with silky black skin and eyes that appeared to shine from across the room. But it wasn't just her attractiveness that piqued his interest. There was something about the way she handled herself, a combination of grace and determination that set her apart. The woman looked around uneasily, clutching her handbag close by her side. Paul couldn't help but notice the frayed edges of her coat and the scuffed shoes she was wearing. Despite her obvious anxiety, she kept her head up as she approached the counter. "Welcome to Paul's Diner," he greeted pleasantly. "What can I get for you today?" The woman's eyes met Paul's, and his heart skipped a beat. "Just a coffee, please," she replied quietly. "Black." Paul couldn't resist striking up a conversation while pouring her coffee. "New to town?" he inquired. She nodded, a slight smile tugging on her lips. "Just got here yesterday. I'm Tasha. I'm hoping to find work as a model." Paul raised an eyebrow, impressed. "A model? That's quite a dream." Tasha's smile widened, lighting up her entire face. "It is, but I'm determined to make it happen, no matter what it takes." Paul was extremely moved by her spirit, her unwavering conviction in herself in the face of overwhelming circumstances. He found himself wanting to learn more about this fascinating woman and her enormous goals. Over the next 2 weeks, Paul became increasingly drawn to Tasha. He'd invite her to the diner after it closed, serving up simple but wonderful meals while they talked late into the night. Tasha's eyes would light up as she spoke about her aspirations, and Paul couldn't help but be charmed by her enthusiasm. "I've wanted to be a model since I was a little girl," Tasha said. "Me one evening, her fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of cocoa. Growing up, I never saw anyone who looked like me in magazines or on TV. I want to change that." Paul nodded, his heart full with admiration. "That's amazing, Tasha. You're going to make a difference, I just know it." Paul became more aware of Tasha's difficulties as their relationship grew. She grew up in a low-income neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to provide for the family. Despite the difficulties, Tasha never gave up on her aspirations. "It's been tough," she said, her voice quiet. "I've been to so many auditions, but no one seems to want to give me a chance." Paul reached across the table and softly took her hand. "Don't give up, Tasha. Your time will come." But as much as Paul's heart desired Tasha, he could sense her uncertainty. Tasha sighed deeply one evening as they went through their small town's calm streets. "Paul, you're so kind to me," she replied, just above a whisper. "But I can't help feeling like I don't belong in your world. You've got this amazing restaurant, everyone in town respects you, and me, I'm just chasing a dream that might never come true." Paul paused, turning to face her. "Tasha, listen to me," he urged gently. "Your dream is what makes you special. It's what drew me to you in the first place. Don't ever think you're not good enough." Tasha's eyes shone with unshed tears. "But what if I fail? What if I'm just wasting my time?" Paul's heart wrenched from the skepticism in her voice. He wanted nothing more than to dispel her concerns and let her see herself as he saw her, strong, gorgeous, and full of promise. As Paul and Tasha's relationship progressed, the small town's gossip mill began to grind. Whispers and strange glances followed the couple everywhere they went. Paul initially tried to ignore it, focusing instead on Tasha's warm smile and the light in her eyes as she discussed her dreams. One afternoon, while Paul was closing the cafe, his lifelong friend Mike leaned against the counter, a concerned expression on his face. "Paul, what are you doing with that Tasha girl?" Mike questioned quietly. "You know she's never going to make it as a model, right?" Paul felt his jaw clench. "What do you mean by that?" Mike shrugged, appearing embarrassed. "Come on, man, well, you know, black girls don't become models. It's just not realistic." Paul's hands clenched by his sides. He took a long breath, attempting to control his wrath. "That's not true, Mike, and even if it was, it wouldn't matter. Tasha's got talent and determination." Mike, however, was not the only one who expressed concern. Paul's mother drew him aside during the weekly family supper, her face pinched in concern. "Honey, I'm just concerned," she murmured, caressing his arm. "This modeling thing, it's not a real job. What kind of future can you have with someone who's chasing such an unrealistic dream?" Paul felt a pang in his heart. He had always valued his mother's opinion, but this time he knew she was mistaken. "Mom, Tasha's dream is part of who she is. It's one of the things I love most about her." As the days passed, Paul found himself continuously defending Tasha and her goals. Everyone in town seemed to have an opinion, and the majority of them were not favorable. They'd mumble behind their hands, saying things like, "She's not even that pretty," or "Who does she think she is?" Each comment was like a knife in Paul's heart. He was aware of Tasha's tireless efforts and her unwavering faith in herself in the face of rejection. He wished the community could see what he saw. A beautiful, determined woman with a golden heart and a spirit that would not be shattered. Paul and Tasha sat on a park bench as the sun began to set, giving a warm glow over the town. The air was filled with the aroma of growing flowers, but Paul could tell Tasha's heart was heavy. "What's on your mind?" he gently said, grasping her hand in his. Tasha groaned, her eyes gleaming from unshed tears. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if I'm chasing an impossible dream," she said, barely above a whisper. Paul gripped her hand, encouraging her to continue. Tasha took a deep breath and began telling her story. "I've wanted to be a model since I was a little girl," she explained, a little smile on her lips. "But every agency I've gone to has turned me away. They say I'm not the right look, or that there's no market for black models in this area." As Tasha talked, Paul felt a combination of awe and melancholy flood over him. He had no idea how much rejection she had endured, yet she still clung to her dream with both hands. "It's been so hard, Paul," Tasha said, her voice shaking. "There are days when I want to give up. When I think maybe everyone else is right, maybe I'm not pretty enough or talented enough." Paul's heart wrenched for her. He drew her closer, placing his arm around her shoulders. "Tasha, you're the most beautiful person I know, inside and out. And your determination, it's inspiring." Tasha leaned into him, finding strength in his words and presence. "Sometimes it feels like I'm fighting this battle all alone," she told me. "You're not alone anymore," Paul stated firmly. "I believe in you, Tasha, and I'll be here cheering you on every step of the way." As they sat there, the sky darkened around them. Paul realized how much Tasha had been going through. Continual rejection, doubt, and the fight to keep her dream alive in the face of insurmountable difficulties. His admiration for her got more at that point. Paul made a quiet pledge to himself and Tasha. He would be her rock, her staunchest backer, no matter what obstacles were ahead. The tie between them became stronger, forged in the fire of shared dreams and steadfast support. As the weeks progressed into months, Paul and Tasha's love grew like a gorgeous spring flower. They spent every free time together, sharing their dreams, anxieties, and hopes for the future. Paul was filled with pride every time he observed Tasha's drive to pursue her modeling profession despite the continuous disappointments. One warm evening, as they strolled hand in hand through the town's little park, Paul realized it was time. He'd had the ring in his pocket for days, waiting for the right moment. As they approached the old oak tree where they had their first kiss, Paul paused and turned to face Tasha. "Tasha," he added, his voice shaking slightly, "you've brought so much joy into my life. I can't imagine spending a single day without you." Tasha's eyes widened as Paul fell to one knee and took out a little velvet box. "Will you marry me?" he inquired, his heart racing. Tasha's eyes filled with tears as she gladly nodded. "Yes, oh, Paul, yes," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him. The news of their engagement quickly traveled across the little community. While some praised the happy couple, others were less complimentary. Paul's family was stunned, their displeasure visible in their tight smiles and awkward congratulations. "Son, are you sure about this?" Paul's father inquired one evening, his brow furrowed in anxiety. She's not exactly from our world, and that modeling dream of hers, it's just not practical." Paul experienced a wave of protectiveness. "Dad, I love Tasha. She's kind, hardworking, and has a heart of gold. Her dreams are part of what makes her special." His mother joined in, her voice tinged with anxiety. "But, Paul, think about your future. What will people say? A respectable restaurant owner marrying a what?" "Mom," Paul countered, his voice firm, "a black woman. A woman who dares to dream big. That's exactly why I love her." Despite opposition from family and friends, Paul and Tasha stayed steadfast. Their love was a fortress strong enough to resist the tempest of condemnation that raged around them. They spent their evenings planning their future, dreaming of a life full of love, support, and shared goals. The day of Paul and Tasha's wedding arrived, bringing with it a mix of happiness and sadness. The little chapel, which is typically filled with excitement on such occasions, felt strangely quiet. Only a few people filled the pews, their looks a mix of uncertainty and false smiles. Paul's heart filled with love and pride as Tasha came down the aisle, her beauty shining through despite the simplicity of her outfit. However, he couldn't ignore the murmured comments and disapproving looks from some of the attendees. The ceremony was brief, but profound. When the priest asked if anyone opposed the union, there was a tense stillness in the room. Paul and Tasha exchanged concerned looks, both painfully aware of the judgment hovering in the air. Tasha's voice quivered slightly as they exchanged vows, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Paul reassured her by squeezing her hands and keeping his gaze fixed on her. At that point, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Following the ceremony, the newlyweds went to a secluded part of the reception hall. The tiny group of guests mingled awkwardly, and the customary enthusiasm of a wedding celebration was missing. Paul grasped Tasha's hands in his voice soft and full of emotion. "I'm sorry it had to be like this," he remarked, nodding at the scant audience. Tasha's lips trembled as she fought back tears. "I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I didn't expect it to hurt this much," she said softly. Paul drew her closer, throwing his arms around her. "We have each other," he said softly into her hair. "That's all that matters." As they hugged one another, the gravity of their situation became clear. They were facing a future in which they might not have the support of their families or be accepted by their communities. The path ahead would be difficult, but in that calm time, they found strength in their love and dedication to one another. As the newlyweds settled into their modest house, the reality of their new life together became clear. Paul immersed himself into his job at the restaurant, determined to build a solid basis for their future. His days were lengthy, packed with the hustle and bustle of staff management, meal preparation, and customer satisfaction. Tasha, on the other hand, was determined to pursue her modeling goals. She spent hours looking through fashion publications, practicing her walk, and refining her cosmetic methods. Every morning, she'd kiss Paul goodbye and leave with hope in her heart, ready for another day of casting calls and auditions. However, as the weeks passed into months, opportunities remained frustratingly few. Tasha would get home with her shoulders down and her heart heavy with disappointment. "I just don't understand," she'd remark, her voice quivering. "I'm trying so hard, but it feels like no one wants to give me a chance." Paul would take her into his arms, his heart throbbing for her. "You're beautiful and talented," he'd tell her. "Your time will come. We just have to be patient." Tasha's ambition began to put a strain on her finances. The costs of professional shots, fashionable attire, and travel to nearby towns for auditions gradually accumulated. Paul found himself working longer hours to make ends meet, frequently arriving home well after Tasha had gone to bed. One evening, as they sat at their modest kitchen table, the weight of their problems weighed heavily in the air. Tasha slid her dinner about her plate, her appetite dwindling from stress. "Maybe I should just give up," she whispered gently, her eyes lowered. "Find a regular job to help out." Paul reached across the table and took her hand in his. "No," he replied firmly. "This is your dream. We'll figure it out together." Even as he spoke the words, Paul sensed a sliver of doubt. He loved Tasha with all his heart, but he couldn't help but worry how long they could keep this going. The condemning whispers in town had not stopped, and he could feel the pressure on both of them increasing with each passing day. As the weeks went by, Paul's steadfast support for Tasha became the talk of the town. His buddies, who had previously supported his success, were now whispering behind his back. They gathered in the local diner, shaking their heads and clicking their tongues. "Did you hear? Tasha went to another casting call in the city," one of them explained, stirring his coffee. "Came back empty-handed, as usual," another commented. "I don't get it. Why doesn't Paul just tell her to give it up? He's working himself to the bone for nothing." The rumor spread like wildfire and soon reached Paul's ears. One afternoon, while preparing for the dinner rush, his longtime friend Mike approached him in the kitchen. "Paul, buddy," Mike said, his voice cautious. "I think you need to hear something." Paul looked up from the veggies he was slicing, his brow wrinkled. "What's up, Mike?" Mike shuffled uncomfortably. "Look, people are talking. They're saying Tasha's dragging you down with her pipe dreams. Maybe it's time to." But Paul cut him off with a forceful voice. "Stop right there, Mike. I don't want to hear it. Tasha's dreams are important to me, and I won't have anyone speaking badly about her." Mike raised his hands in surrender and stepped away, leaving Paul alone with his thoughts. That night, as Paul drove home, the weight of the town's judgment fell hard on his shoulders. He held the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles becoming white. Part of him wanted to yell and urge everyone to mind their own business. But another part, a tiny voice he sought to quiet, wondered if they were correct. Paul inhaled deeply as he turned into the driveway. He pushed those concerns away, remembering himself of Tasha's determination and the love they had. When he entered their home, he saw Tasha snuggled up on the couch, flipping through a modeling magazine. "Hey, beautiful," he remarked, with a forced smile. "How was your day?" Tasha looked up, her eyes full of hope. "I think I might have a lead on a small local shoot," she exclaimed enthusiastically. Paul's heart overflowed with pride and affection. In that instant, he realized that no amount of rumor or judgment could break his belief in her. He sat down alongside her and drew her close. "That's fantastic, honey," he exclaimed, meaning every word. "I believe in you, no matter what anyone else says." Tasha stood outside the audition door, terrified as she held her portfolio. She took a long breath, hoping to calm her worries. She believed this was her chance. This time, things had to work out. But when she went out of the building an hour later, her shoulders dropped with disappointment. The rejection wounded. The casting director's words lingered in her mind. "Not quite what we're looking for," they said, their grin pleasant but dismissive. Tasha walked to her car while fighting back tears. She slid into the driver's seat and took a hesitant breath. The typical doubts came in, whispering that perhaps she was not made out for this. Perhaps everyone in town was correct. When she arrived home, Paul was waiting for her. A single look at her face revealed everything he needed to know. "Oh, honey," he replied sweetly, offering his arms. Tasha sank into his embrace, allowing the tears to pour. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Paul," she said quietly. "Maybe I'm just not good enough." Paul hugged her tightly, his heart aching for her anguish. He gently brought her to the couch and sat down beside her. "Tasha, let me," he whispered, his voice calm yet forceful. When she caught his gaze, he said, "You are beautiful, talented, and extremely strong. This rejection does not define you." Tasha wiped her eyes and sniffled. "But what if it never happens? What if I'm just chasing a stupid dream?" Paul clasped her hands in his and squeezed them reassuringly. "It's not stupid to have dreams, Tasha. Your determination is one of the things I love most about you. Remember why you started this journey?" Tasha nodded slowly, remembering the little girl who practiced her runway walk in front of the mirror. "That passion is still in you," Paul explained. "I see it every day. These setbacks are tough, but they're making you stronger. One day, all this hard work will pay off." His words poured over Tasha, calming her fears. She leaned toward him, finding strength in his unflinching support. "Thank you," she muttered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Paul gently kissed her forehead. "You'd still be amazing, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together, remember?" Tasha managed a little smile, feeling a glimmer of hope return to her. With Paul by her side, she mustered the confidence to continue believing in herself and her dreams. As time passed, Paul and Tasha's friendship became stronger, forged in the crucible of struggle. They found safety in each other, escaping the murmurs and stares that followed them around town. Tasha noticed a flyer for an upcoming local beauty competition. While sitting on their porch swing one evening, her heart raced with a combination of excitement and anxiety. She pointed to the flyer and said, "Paul, maybe this could be my chance." Paul gripped her hand. "You should go for it, Tasha. I believe in you." Tasha bit her lip as doubt crept in. "But what if I fail again? The whole town will be watching." Paul turned to face her, his eyes full of purpose. "Then we'll face it together. Remember, their opinions don't define you. You're beautiful inside and out." Tasha was encouraged by Paul's words and decided to attend the pageant. She pushed herself into preparation, practicing her walk, and working on her skill routine late into the night. Paul was always available, delivering words of support, and bringing her cups of tea when she pushed herself too hard. Tasha's nerves became more intense as the pageant day neared. The night before, she couldn't sleep. "What if I'm not good enough?" she said quietly, in the darkness. Paul laid over and wrapped his arm around her. "You are more than good enough. You're going to shine tomorrow." The morning of the pageant dawned, and Tasha stood backstage, her heart racing. She could hear the murmur of the audience, knowing that many had come to witness her failure. But as she looked out from behind the curtain, she noticed Paul in the front row, beaming with pride. Tasha took a big breath and stepped onto the stage. The bright lights blinded her for a while, but then she noticed Paul's face in the crowd. His encouraging smile gave her courage, and she resumed her practice with renewed confidence. Tasha's confidence grew as she glided effortlessly across the platform. The audience, previously skeptical, was now in awe. Her talent presentation, a touching spoken word piece about perseverance, moved many to tears. Paul beamed with pride, his gaze never leaving his wife. Tasha held her breath as the results were announced. "And the winner is Tasha Jones." The crowd applauded, and Tasha couldn't believe what she was hearing. She'd won. After years of rejection and doubt, she had finally won, however slightly. As she accepted the crown and sash, she burst into tears of pleasure. She locked eyes with Paul in the audience, whose expression was a mix of excitement and pride. All of their struggles together seemed worthwhile at that point. As Tasha exited the stage, still dazed from her victory, a well-dressed woman approached her. "Excuse me, Tasha, I'm Sarah Miller, a talent scout from New York. I was incredibly impressed by your performance today." Tasha felt her heart skip a beat. "Thank you, Miss Miller. That means a lot to me." Sarah grinned warmly. "I'd love to discuss the possibility of working with you. Your look is fresh, and your stage presence is captivating. Here's my card. Let's set up a meeting to talk about your future in modeling." Tasha grabbed the business card, quivering slightly. She couldn't believe what had happened. After years of closed doors and rejections, a window of opportunity had opened. As the crowd cleared, Paul raced to Tasha's side and wrapped her in a tight embrace. "You did it, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Tasha buried her face into Paul's shoulder, overcome with emotion. "Paul, you won't believe what just happened," she said quietly, her voice full of excitement and disbelief. A few days later, Tasha and Paul sat across from Sarah Miller. In a small cafe, their hearts pounding with excitement. Sarah smiled pleasantly and handed a folder across the table. "I have some exciting news for you, Tasha," Sarah began. "There's a local clothing boutique looking for fresh faces for their new ad campaign. It's not a big-name brand, but it's a start." Tasha's eyes widened as she opened the packet, her fingers running over the terms of the offer. It wasn't the dazzling high-fashion shot she had always envisioned, but it was real. There was a chance. "The shoot is for their summer collection," Sarah explained. "It's mostly casual wear sundresses, that sort of thing. They're looking for models who can showcase their clothes for everyday women." Paul squeezed Tasha's hand beneath the table, his eyes beaming with joy. "That sounds perfect for you, honey," he murmured quietly. Tasha nodded, barely above a murmur. "It does, doesn't it?" Sarah leaned forwards, her tone encouraging. "This could be a great stepping stone, Tasha. It's local, so people in town will see it. It could lead to more opportunities." As the reality of the offer dawned on Tasha, a mix of excitement and trepidation welled up. This was her long-term goal. It wasn't the cover of Vogue, but it was a legitimate modeling opportunity. "I'll do it," Tasha responded, her voice becoming more confident with each word. "I'd be honored to be part of this campaign." Paul placed his arm around Tasha's shoulders, bringing her closer. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. This is just the beginning." As they left the cafe, Tasha hugged the folder to her chest, her steps lighter than they had been in years. Paul couldn't stop smiling, his heart full of delight for his wife. "You know what this means, don't you?" Paul asked, as they went towards their automobile. "All those years of hard work, all those rejections were leading to this moment. You never gave up, and now, it's finally paying off." Tasha leaned in, glad for Paul's steadfast support. "We never gave up," she reminded him. "I couldn't have done this without you." Tasha's modeling career took off, and she found herself with more opportunities than ever before. Her local ad campaign had been well received, and she was beginning to get recognition throughout town. It was a modest step, but it seemed like a tremendous leap to Tasha. One lovely afternoon, Tasha's phone rang with an incoming call from her new agent, Sarah. Her heart raced as she responded. "Tasha, I've got great news," Sarah exclaimed, her voice full of excitement. "Remember that swimwear company I told you about? They want you for their summer catalog shoot." Tasha's eyes widened, and her free hand covered her lips in shock. "Really? Oh my goodness, that's amazing." As Sarah rattled off the specifics, Tasha's elation turned to concern. The shoot was arranged on the same weekend as Paul's annual cookout, which his pals had been looking forward to for months. Tasha told Paul about the news later that evening after supper. His face brightened up with pride, but immediately trembled when she revealed the date. "Conflict." "Oh," he said, hesitating halfway to his mouth. "That's the same day as the barbecue." Tasha nodded, her eyes lowered. I know. I'm so sorry, Paul. I can try to reschedule. Paul moved across the table to take her hand. No, sweetheart, this is a big opportunity for you. We'll figure something out. The next day, as Paul was getting ready for the dinner rush at his restaurant, his pals Mike and Tom came by. They were regulars, always ready to tell a joke or share some town gossip. So, Paul continued, leaning against the counter, we heard Tasha might not make it to the barbecue. Another big modeling gig, huh? Paul nodded with a slight smile on his face. Yeah, she's got a shoot for a swimwear catalog. It's a great opportunity for her. Tom chuckled and shook his head. A swimsuit shoot? Well, guess she better enjoy it while it lasts. You know how fickle the fashion world can be. Mike jumped in, sounding mockingly sympathetic. Yeah. Today it's swimsuits, tomorrow it's back to flipping burgers. No offense, Paul. Paul felt his jaw clench, and a flood of rage rise in his chest. He took a deep breath, and tried to keep his voice steady. Tasha's worked hard for this. She's not going anywhere but up. The tension in the air was evident as Paul's friends exchanged looks. They could tell they'd touched a chord, but neither appeared eager to back down. Tasha's phone rang one sunny afternoon, and her heart skipped a beat when she recognized Sarah, her agent. She picked up the phone with trembling hands. Sarah said, Tasha, great news. You've been selected to walk in the Oakville Regional Fashion Show next month. Tasha's eyes expanded, and she squealed with delight. Oh, my gosh, Sarah, are you serious? Absolutely. This is a big deal, Tasha. It could really boost your career. Tasha went to Paul's restaurant after finishing. Off the phone, bursting through the doors with a big smile. Paul, Tasha said, virtually bouncing with pleasure. I got into the Oakville show. Paul's face brightened up as he rushed around the counter to embrace her. That's incredible, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. As they hugged strongly, other diners mumbled and looked. Mrs. Jackson, a regular, leaned over to her friend and said, well, looks like our little town celebrity is moving up in the world. Her pal snickered. We'll see how long that lasts. These fashion folks are fickle, you know. Despite the chatter, Paul and Tasha stayed engrossed in their celebration. Their bliss, a bubble that rumor couldn't break. Later that evening, as they walked hand in hand around the town square, they overheard more whispers and exchanged pointed stares. Paul felt Tasha's hand tighten against his. Don't let them get to you, he whispered softly, squeezing her hand for reassurance. They don't understand how hard you've worked for this. Tasha took a long breath before nodding. You're right, we can't let their negativity bring us down. This is a huge opportunity, and I'm going to make the most of it. Paul beamed, his eyes brimming with love and pride. That's my girl, we're in this together. Remember, let's focus on your big break and leave all this small town talk behind us. As they continued walking, Tasha felt a weight lift off her shoulders. With Paul at her side, she thought she could face anything, including their nosy neighbors. Her dreams were finally taking shape, and she was determined to see them through, regardless of what others thought. Tasha was nervous as she stood backstage at the Oakville Regional Fashion Show, surrounded by stylists and other models. She took a deep breath before closing her eyes. You've got this, she said quietly to herself, absorbing Paul's steadfast support. Tasha walked the runway with grace and confidence. The bright lights highlighted her brilliant smile, and her walk was both graceful and intriguing. As she neared the end of the runway, she adopted a position that emphasized not only her dress, but also her inner strength and will. The audience was enthralled. Paul grinned with pride from the front row, his gaze never leaving his wife beside him. Several industry executives leaned forward in their seats, apparently impressed with Tasha's presence. As Tasha took her final walk, the cheering grew louder. Her heart jumped when she saw a well-known fashion designer nodding in approval. After the show, Tasha was approached by several agents and designers. They complimented her and exchanged contact information, intending to get in touch soon. "You were absolutely stunning out there," one agent exclaimed. "I haven't seen such natural talent in years." Paul made his way through the crowd, grabbing Tasha in a tight embrace as he approached her. "You were amazing, sweetheart," he whispered into her ear. "I always knew you had it in you." Tasha's phone rang regularly for the next 2 weeks, alerting her to new chances. She was invited to photo shoots, asked to walk in smaller events, and even given the opportunity to be the face of a local boutique summer campaign. For the first time in years, Tasha felt a surge of optimism. Her dreams, which had seemed out of reach, were now within reach. She jumped at every opportunity with passion and determination, aiming to seize this watershed moment in her career. Paul's faith in Tasha grew stronger as he witnessed her success. He changed his restaurant schedule so that he could accompany her to shoots when possible, constantly offering encouragement and support. Tasha's phone rang one lovely afternoon when she was assisting Paul at the restaurant. Her heart raced as she noticed the caller. It was the agent she had met at the fashion show. She answered with trembling hands. "Hello? Tasha, darling, I have fantastic news," the agent enthused. "Remember that high-end fashion brand I mentioned? Well, they want you for their new campaign." Tasha's eyes widened, and she held the phone more tightly. "Are you serious?" she exclaimed. "Absolutely. It's a major contract, Tasha. This could be your big break." Tasha's eyes filled with tears as she listened to the details. When she hung up, she looked at Paul, who had been watching her with concern. "Paul," she said, caught up with emotion, "I got it. I got a major contract with a high-end fashion brand." Paul's face brightened with excitement. He went over and drew Tasha into his arms, turning her around. "I knew you could do it," he cried, pressing a kiss across her lips. Tasha's contract became widely known in their little town. The same individuals who had mocked her dreams before now stared in surprise as billboards with her face erected on the outskirts of town. Mrs. Jackson, one of the most outspoken detractors, couldn't stop herself from staring at the magazine cover with Tasha's bright grin. "I can't believe it," she said to her pal. "Who would have thought Tasha Jones would make it big?" Her friend nodded, with a trace of envy in her tone. "And to think we all laughed at Paul for believing in her." As Tasha's career progressed, the town's attitude changed. People who had previously turned their backs on the newlyweds approached them with fake grins and congratulations. One evening, when Paul and Tasha were having a pleasant meal at home, their doorbell rang. Mr. Peterson, one of Paul's old buddies, had insulted Tasha's ambitions. "I just wanted to say congratulations," he said, avoiding eye contact. "You've really made it, Tasha. We're all proud of you." Tasha and Paul exchanged knowing glances. They gently thanked Mr. Peterson, but as they closed the door, they couldn't help but feel vindicated. Tasha's delight was apparent as she clutched the gold invitation in her hands. "Paul, can you believe it? We're going to New York City for Fashion Week." Her eyes glittered with delight as she glanced at her husband. Paul grinned, but Tasha sensed a hint of hesitation in his eyes. "That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you," he remarked, his voice a mix of joy and trepidation. As Tasha started preparing for their trip, she couldn't help but notice Paul's restless pacing. She paused, set down the dress she was carrying, and turned to face him. "What's wrong, honey?" she inquired gently. Paul sighed and ran a hand over his hair. "It's just New York City, Tasha. It's so different from our little town. I'm worried I won't fit in with all those fancy, fashionable people." Tasha's heart overflowed with love for her husband. She approached him and held his hands in hers. "Oh, Paul," she said, "you don't have to worry about fitting in. You're the reason I'm here in the first place. Without your love and support, I never would have made it this far." She guided him to sit on the side of their bed, her gaze never leaving his. Remember when nobody in this town believed in me? You were the only one who stood by my side. You're my rock, Paul. We're in this together, just like we've always been." Paul's tension subsided as he listened to Tasha's comments. He clutched her hands, a faint smile spreading over his lips. "You're right," he replied. "I'm just being silly. Of course, we're in this together." Tasha leaned in and kissed him gently. "Besides," she said, with a teasing grin, "you're the most handsome man I know. You'll outshine everyone there, mister." Small-town restaurant owner. Paul chuckled as his confidence returned. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I argue?" He pulled Tasha into a warm embrace, glad for her understanding and support. As they clutched each other, Tasha said, "We've come so far together, Paul. This is just another adventure for us, and I wouldn't want to share it with anyone else but you." As Paul and Tasha stepped out of their taxi onto the bustling streets of New York City, they were immediately surrounded by a sea of flashing lights. The paparazzi rushed around them, their cameras clicking wildly. "Tasha, Tasha, over here!" the photographers screamed, vying for position. Tasha, gorgeous in her emerald gown, automatically sought for Paul's hand. She could feel him strain beside her, his eyes widening in astonishment at the unexpected attention. "It's okay," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "Just smile and keep walking." Paul nodded and forced a smile on his face. He felt out of place in his rented tuxedo, acutely aware of how far different this world was from their modest hometown. But when he looked at Tasha, who exuded confidence and beauty, he realized he'd do anything to help her achieve her aspirations. They made their way down the red carpet, Tasha effortlessly posing for photos. As Paul stood by her side, trying to appear relaxed, he was astounded at how naturally she handled the limelight, answering questions and smiling for the cameras as if she'd done it all her life. Inside the venue, the couple was quickly accosted by fashion designers, models, and industry executives who were all anxious to meet Tasha. Paul found himself drifting into the background as others clamored to talk with his wife. "You must be so proud," a well-dressed woman told Paul, noting his slightly bewildered expression. "I am," Paul responded, his gaze never leaving Tasha. "More than I can say." Paul became increasingly uncomfortable as the night progressed. He didn't grasp the fashion language, and he felt out of place among the glittering crowd. But every time Tasha looked at him, her face lit up with a smile, reminding him why he was there. During a calm period, Tasha returned to Paul's side. "How are you holding up?" she said, her voice filled with concern. Paul took a deep breath. "It's different," he told me, "but seeing you shine like this, it's worth every uncomfortable moment." As Paul and Tasha returned to their small community, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The once judgmental whispers had given way to eager banter, and eyes that had previously avoided them now looked in wonder. Tasha's face was everywhere, on billboards and magazine covers, making it impossible to ignore, even in their little corner of the globe. Paul's phone, which had been dormant for months, suddenly lit up with messages from old acquaintances and distant relatives. "Hey, buddy, long time no see," said one text from his boyhood friend, Mike. "We should catch up sometime." Paul showed Tasha the message while lifting an eyebrow. "Funny how they all want to talk now," he replied, with a resentful tone. Tasha put a soothing hand on his arm. "It's okay to be upset, Paul, but remember, we're better than that. We won't let this change us." As they proceeded down Main Street, heads turned and whispers ensued. Mrs. Jackson, who had previously vowed that Tasha would never make it, now waved joyously from her porch. "Tasha, dear, you look absolutely radiant." Paul's Aunt Clara, who had refused to attend their wedding, unexpectedly showed up at their house with a handmade pie. "I was just in the neighborhood," she explained, her gaze drawn to Tasha's fancy handbag. Throughout it all, Paul and Tasha maintained their ideals. They continued to eat at the same diner where they had their first date. leaving substantial tips and greeting everyone with genuine grins. Tasha turned to Paul one evening when they were sitting on their porch swing. "You know, all this attention, it doesn't mean anything compared to what we have." Paul nodded and pulled her close. "I'm so proud of you, Ash. Not because you're famous, but because you never gave up on your dreams. You're still the same beautiful, determined woman I fell in love with." Tasha's eyes filled up with tears. "And you're still the same kind, supportive man who believed in me when no one else did. Fame or no fame, that's what matters most." As the sun sank over their small town, Paul and Tasha sat in peaceful stillness, thankful for one another and the adventure that had taken them there. They were confident that no matter what happened, their love and principles would endure. Tasha's face appeared on the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. Her beautiful stride dominated the runways of Paris, Milan, and New York. The small-town girl had become an international modeling star, with her name whispered reverently in fashion circles throughout the world. Paul and Tasha's success in their hometown could not be ignored. The couple went along Main Street together, raising a stir. People who had before dismissed Tasha's fantasies now gazed in astonishment, their jaws falling as the pair passed by. "Mrs. Peterson," asked her friend, "is that really Tasha Jones? I can't believe she made it so big." Paul's restaurant had become a neighborhood favorite, not just for its great food, but also for the opportunity to catch a peek of the renowned pair. Despite their newfound fame and money, Paul and Tasha stuck to their origins. They continued to volunteer at the local soup kitchen every Sunday, as they had done when times were tight. Tasha used her position to advocate body positivity and racial diversity in the fashion business, never forgetting the challenges she endured along the way. Tasha turned to Paul one day as they were having a peaceful moment in the park where they used to dream about their future. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she inquired, her eyes beaming with delight and appreciation. Paul clasped her palm, his voice full of emotion. "I always knew you could do it, Ash. Your determination was unstoppable." As they headed home, they passed the beauty salon where Mrs. Jackson, one of their fiercest critics, worked. The older woman raced out, blushing with humiliation. "Tasha, Paul," she said, "I just wanted to say I was wrong about you both. What you've achieved is truly remarkable." Tasha smiled genuinely, displaying no signs of bitterness. "Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. That means a lot to us." Later that evening, as they prepared for a charity banquet in town, Paul watched Tasha get dressed, amazed at how she remained the same kind-hearted lady he fell in love with despite her global celebrity. "You know," he added, straightening his tie, "I'm proudest of how we've stayed true to ourselves through all of this." Tasha nodded, her gaze met his in the mirror. "That's because we have each other. Fame changes a lot of things, but it hasn't changed us." Paul and Tasha stood hand in hand on the steps of the town hall, beaming with delight. A sizable audience had assembled, vibrating with anticipation for the couple's big announcement. The same people who had previously gossiped and questioned them now looked on with admiration and a hint of embarrassment. "We're thrilled to announce," Paul began, his voice firm and sincere, "that we will be making a substantial donation to the Millbrook Community Foundation." A collective gasp echoed throughout the crowd. Tasha stepped forward, her eyes full of emotion. "This town has been our home through thick and thin," she told me. "We want to give back and help those who might be struggling, just like we once did." The $500,000 investment would go toward a variety of programs aimed at improving the lives of those in need, including refurbishing the local shelter and establishing a scholarship fund for young artists and entrepreneurs. Paul and Tasha's generosity would have a far-reaching impact. Mayor Jackson, long one of their sharpest opponents, approached the microphone with tears in his eyes. "On behalf of Millbrook, I want to express our deepest gratitude," he added, his voice shaking. "Your generosity will change lives for generations to come." As the audience exploded in ovation, Paul and Tasha exchanged passionate glances. They remembered when they could barely pay rent and Tasha's modeling goals looked unattainable. They now had the ability to lift people and provide hope where there had previously just been struggle. Following the wedding, as they strolled around the park, an old woman approached them. Her eyes were red from crying, but she had a grateful smile. "You don't know me," she replied, with a shaky voice. "But your donation means my granddaughter can go to art school. She's talented, but we could never afford it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." Paul and Tasha embraced the woman, their eyes wetting over. This was why they had made the donation, to transform people's lives and provide opportunities that they had previously only dreamed of. Tasha sat in their pleasant living room, her gaze wandering over the framed magazine covers on the walls. Each one shared a narrative of overcoming adversity and realizing dreams despite all circumstances. Her heart flooded with appreciation as she remembered Paul, her support through it all. "Paul," she said gently, her voice full of sorrow, "I've been thinking about something." Paul looked up from his newspaper, his gaze heated and focused. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Tasha took a big breath. "I want to give back in a different way. I want to open a school right here in Millbrook for aspiring models." Paul's cheeks brightened with pride. "That's a wonderful idea, Tasha. You've got so much to share." Tasha's eyes shone as she explained her vision. "I remember how difficult it was when I first started. Rejection, the uncertainty, and not knowing how to navigate the industry. I want to help others avoid those pitfalls." She rose up and walked the room, her enthusiasm building. "We could teach them about proper nutrition, how to walk the runway, how to handle interviews, and most importantly, how to stay true to themselves in such a tough business." Paul nodded, his smile growing wider. "You could even bring in some of your industry contacts as guest speakers, give the students a real insider's view." Tasha clasped her hands together. "Oh, Paul, that's perfect. And we could offer scholarships to those who can't afford tuition. Give everyone a fair shot, just like we wished for back then." Tasha's mind raced with ideas as they talked about the intricacies. She imagined a gorgeous facility full of enthusiastic children, their eyes filled with the same hope she had. She imagined herself standing in front of them, hearing not only the industry's beauty, but also the hard work and determination required. "We'll call it the Tasha Jones School of Modeling," Paul said with satisfaction. Tasha shook her head, and her eyes misted over. "No, it should be the Jones School of Modeling, because I couldn't have done any of this without you, Paul. Your support made all the difference." Paul drew her into a tight embrace, overtaken by emotion. Tasha knew as they hugged one another that this school would be their legacy, a tribute to the strength of love, determination, and giving back to the community that had previously doubted them. Millbrook's entire community came together to celebrate the official launch of the Jones School of Modeling. The sun was shining brightly when Tasha and Paul cut the ribbon in front of the newly renovated building. Its modern exterior stood in stark contrast to the quaint businesses around it. Crowds gathered to see the historic event, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and respect. Many of the same folks who had previously questioned Tasha now shouted enthusiastically, pride rising in their chests at the hometown girl who had made it big and returned to share her triumph. Tasha, gorgeous in a stunning designer gown, addressed the audience through tears in her eyes. "This school is a dream come true," she exclaimed, her voice full with excitement. "Not just for me, but for every young person who has ever dared to dream big. Here, we'll nurture those dreams and give them wings." As the doors opened, excited kids poured in, their eyes wide with anticipation. Young women from different walks of life, some from Millbrook and others from nearby towns, had enrolled in the school's inaugural class. They talked and pointed as Tasha escorted them around the cutting-edge facilities, including the runway, practice area, and picture studio. In the weeks that followed, the school was alive with activity. Tasha immersed herself in teaching, imparting not only the technical parts of modeling, but also the life lessons she'd acquired along the way. Her classmates hung on her, every word captivated by her transformation from small-town girl to international supermodel. The school has a far-reaching impact on the community. Young women strolled with renewed confidence, better postures, and brighter grins. Parents who had previously opposed their daughters' modeling dreams now expressed satisfaction in the talents they were obtaining at the Jones School of Modeling. Tasha became more than just a successful role model for the residents of Millbrook. She became a beacon of optimism and determination. Her narrative of overcoming difficulties and attaining her dreams against the odds inspired not only her kids, but the entire community. Paul's restaurant, originally a modest local favorite, had grown into a booming chain with outlets around the state. The original Millbrook location still retained a particular place in his heart, with the walls now covered with images of his journey, with Tasha and media cuttings of their accomplishment. On a busy Saturday evening, Paul strolled through the kitchen of his main restaurant, sampling sauces and encouraging his team. The aroma of his famous pot roast permeated the air, reminding him of the day Tasha first entered his life. "Mr. Paul," cried out one of the young chefs, "the new recipe is ready for you to try." Paul smiled, his eyes crinkled at the corners. He had gone a long way since being the only cook in a small kitchen. Now, he had a team of skilled chefs working with him, bringing new ideas to the table. As he sampled the dish, his phone vibrated with a message from Tasha. She was on her way back from a picture session and planned to meet him at the restaurant. Paul's heart overflowed with pride and affection. Despite their hectic schedules, they always found time for one another. Later that evening, as Tasha entered the restaurant, heads turned. She looked as stunning as ever, but it was her pleasant smile and gentle nature that captured everyone. She welcomed the employees by name and inquired about their families and goals. Paul entered from the kitchen, wiping his hands with his apron. He embraced Tasha and planted a sweet kiss on her cheek. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he inquired. "Wonderful," Tasha exclaimed. "But I'm even happier to be here with you." Customers and staff alike couldn't help but notice the couple as they sat down for a quiet dinner. Paul and Tasha represented more than just achievement. They exemplified love, tenacity, and the power of believing in one's aspirations. As Paul and Tasha were enjoying their nice dinner, a group of familiar faces entered the restaurant. Paul's heart skipped a beat as he recognized his old Frenchy ones, who had taunted him for marrying Tasha years before. They approached the table hesitantly, their eyes lowered and their shoulders drooping. "Paul, Tasha," one of them, Tom, called out. "Woo, hope we're not interrupting." Paul glanced at Tasha, who gave him a polite nod. He returned to the group and motioned for them to join them. "What can we do for you?" he said, his tone calm yet reserved. The group exchanged anxious looks until another friend cleared her throat. "We came to apologize," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were mistaken, Paul, so terribly wrong." Tom nodded in accord. "The way we treated you both was unacceptable. We let our small-town prejudices cloud our judgment, and we squandered an opportunity to help two amazing people." Paul listened quietly, his countenance unreadable. Tasha reached across the table and grabbed his hand, providing silent support. "We've watched you both grow and achieve so much," said another friend, Mike. "The way you've given back to the community, the opportunities you've created, it's truly admirable." Tanya's eyes filled up with tears. "We don't expect forgiveness, but we wanted you to know we're sorry. What you and Tasha have created together is stunning, and we were idiots not to recognize it from the start." Paul took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of pain and bitterness slip off his shoulders. He glanced at Tasha, gathering strength from her loving gaze, before returning to his former companions. "Thank you for your apology," he replied softly. It means a lot to hear this from you." The gathering seemed to hold its breath while waiting for Paul's next comments. With a slight smile, Paul added, "Life is too short to carry grudges. We've all developed and evolved over time. I forgive you." The relief on their faces was evident. Tears flowed freely as they conveyed their appreciation for Paul's elegance and maturity. Tasha smiled proudly at her husband, knowing that his ability to forgive was one of the many reasons she loved him so much. Tasha stood in front of the first set of pupils. At her modeling school, her heart full of pride and enthusiasm. The classroom was full with young ladies from all backgrounds, many of whom reminded Tasha of herself when she first started out. "Welcome, everyone," Tasha said, her voice warm and encouraging. "I know many of you are worried, but I want you to know that you are in a secure environment here. We are all here to learn and grow together." She scanned the room, meeting the gaze of each student. Some appeared excited, some anxious, but everyone was attentive. "I started just like you," Tasha said, her voice overflowing with emotion. "I come from a little village where no one believed in my dreams. I was repeatedly rejected, but I never gave up." Tanya, young woman in the first row, raised a timid hand. "Miss Tasha, how did you keep going when everyone told you to quit?" Tasha smiled faintly, recalling her own hardships. "It was not easy, Tanya. There were times when I wanted to give up. But I had a dream, and people who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." She moved around the class, making eye contact with each kid. "That is what I want to be for each of you. I want to be the one who believes in you and encourages you to be your best self." Another student, Maria, spoke up. "What if we aren't pretty enough? What if we do not fit the mold?" Tasha's expression became stern. "Listen to me. Every Yona body comes in many shapes, sizes, and colors. The modeling industry is changing, and we plan to be a part of it. Your uniqueness is your strength." As the seminar progressed, Tasha recounted her experiences and provided practical advice on posing, walking, and presenting yourself. More importantly, she aimed to boost the pupils' self-esteem. "Remember," Tasha stated as the class came to a close, "modeling is more than just looking pretty. It's about confidence, perseverance, and believing in yourself. Each of you has something unique to offer the world. My role is to assist you in finding and showcasing it." The youngsters clung to her every word, their eyes filled with newfound hope and drive. Tasha recognized herself in each of their facets, the same dreams, the same fierce, but now with a guiding light to direct them. Paul and Tasha stood together at the grand ballroom's entrance, their hearts hammering with excitement and a hint of dread. The annual Starlight Gala, the region's largest charity event, was in full swing. Soft music filled the air as nicely dressed visitors interacted, their jewels glistening under the crystal chandeliers. As they entered the room, heads turned and whispers of adoration echoed throughout the gathering. Tasha looked gorgeous in her flowing emerald gown, while Paul cut a dashing figure in his fitted tuxedo. They were a far cry from the small-town couple who had previously endured derision and suspicion. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer spoke loudly over the speakers, "please welcome our guests of honor, Paul and Tasha." The room erupted with applause. Tasha grabbed Paul's hand, her eyes welling with tears of excitement. Paul, beaming with pride, recalling all the challenges they had conquered to reach this point. As they made their way through the crowd, well-wishers stopped them at every turn. Local business owners, politicians, and even some familiar faces from their hometown congratulated them on their achievements. "We're so proud of what you've done for our community, Mayor Jackson," said Paul, heartily shaking his hand. "Your restaurant chain has created so many jobs, and Tasha, your modeling school is inspiring a whole new generation." Tasha smiled generously. "We're just happy to give back to the community that shaped us," she said, her voice genuine. The pair was led to the stage, where they were presented with the stunning Crystal Award. The inscription stated, "For excellent contributions to community development and youth empowerment." As Paul took the medal, he gazed around at the sea of faces. He saw admiration where there had previously been skepticism, and respect where there had once been scorn. Most significantly, he saw optimism in the eyes of young people who realized that their own dreams could come true. "Thank you all," Paul said, his voice full with emotion. "This honor means everything to us, but the true prize is seeing the difference we've been able to create. Tasha and I have experienced difficulty and doubt. We want to make sure that no one else has to confront those obstacles alone." As the ovation subsided and the couple exited the stage, they found a quiet area of the ballroom to gather their breath. Paul and Tasha stood close together, their hands interlaced, looking out at the dazzling crowd. "Can you believe it?" Tasha muttered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Look at where we are today. It feels like a dream." Paul lovingly squeezed her hand, his heart full with love and pride. "We've come so far, haven't we?" Tasha nodded, thinking back to the early days of their marriage. She remembered the cramped apartment they'd shared, and the continual battle to make ends meet while pursuing her modeling goals. Even after all these years, the memory of their neighbors' disapproving glances and muttered comments stings. "Do you remember how difficult it was in the beginning?" she asked softly. "Nobody believed in us. They all felt we were insane for getting married and me pursuing my ambitions." Paul's gaze softened when he stared into his wife's eyes. "I remember, sweetie, but you know what? Their uncertainty never bothered me. Our love was always sufficient." Tasha snuggled into him, finding strength in his unflinching support. "There were so many times I wanted to give up," she admits, "but you never let me. You believed in me even if I didn't believe in myself. And look at you now." Paul smiled proudly. "A successful model, a mentor to young women, and the most amazing wife I could have ever hoped for." They stood in comfortable silence for a minute, both buried in recollections of their journey, the difficulties they'd encountered, the tears they'd shed, and the victories they'd shared. Everything appeared to fit into a lovely tapestry of their lives. "We proved them all wrong, didn't we?" Tasha responded with a quiet laugh. Paul grinned and drew her close. "We certainly did, but you know what? Even if we hadn't met even, if you never booked a single modeling job, I'd still consider myself the luckiest guy alive. Because I had you." Tasha's heart filled with emotion. "And I have you," she muttered. "That's all I've ever needed." As the sun began to set, creating a beautiful golden glow over their city, Paul and Tasha decided to go for a leisurely stroll around the familiar streets hand in hand. They strolled down the walkways where they had previously faced censure and ridicule. As they went by the local diner, they felt a sense of serenity and satisfaction in the air. Mrs. Jackson, previously one of their sharpest critics, waved at them with a genuine smile. Paul and Tasha returned the welcome with hearts full of forgiveness and understanding. "It's funny how things change," Paul remarked, squeezing Tasha's hand gently. Tasha nodded, her gaze swept across the town that had formed their path. "Who would have thought we'd become the talk of the town in such a different way?" As they continued their walk, they observed a group of young ladies clustered together, enthusiastically discussing Tasha's most recent magazine cover. When they saw the couple, their eyes expanded in admiration. "Mrs. Jones," one of the girls exclaimed. "You're such an inspiration to us." Tasha's heart filled with emotion. She remembered how, like these girls, she used to dream of an unattainable future. "Thank you, sweethearts," she replied kindly. "Never stop believing in yourselves." Paul observed the discussion with delight, amazed at how his wife had become a source of hope for so many people. As they continued on, they passed Paul's first restaurant, which is now one of several in his thriving chain. "Remember when this place was just a tiny hole in the wall?" Paul chuckled. Tasha laid her head against his shoulder. "And now look at you, Mr. Successful businessman." Their trek led them to the park where they had their first kiss. The ancient bench was still there, a silent monument to their long-lasting love. They sat down, enjoying the tranquil evening. "We've come so far," Tasha murmured quietly, her voice full of thankfulness. Paul nodded and wrapped his arm around her. "Our love and resilience got us through it all." As they sat there, relishing in the warmth of their shared experiences and successes, they understood that their trip had not only impacted their own lives, but also had an indelible impact on their community. The town that once judged them now saw them as living proof that with love, determination, and unshakable support, anything is possible. Paul and Tasha sat on their favorite park bench, fingers interlaced, as the sun set beyond the horizon, turning the sky pink and orange. The gentle breeze carried the aroma of budding flowers, a sweet reminder of how their love had thrived despite all difficulties. "You know," Paul murmured quietly, his eyes glittering with emotion, "sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come." Tasha laid her head on his shoulder and let out a happy sigh. "Me neither, but we did it together, right?" They sat in comfortable silence for a minute, reminiscing on their journey from early doubt and struggle to dizzying heights of achievement. Their love had stayed steadfast, guiding them through life's storms. "I'm so grateful for you," Tasha said, her voice full with emotion. "You believed in me when no one else did." Paul gently squeezed her hand. "And you gave me the strength to speak up for what I believed in. We make a great team, don't we?" They reflected on their accomplishments as the last rays of sunlight faded. Tasha's modeling school was booming, providing hope for young dreamers. Paul's eateries were popular community landmarks. More than their professional accomplishments, they valued the love they had fostered and the lives they had touched. "You know what makes me happiest?" Paul inquired, his tone warm and earnest. Tasha gazed up at him with wonder in her eyes. "What's that?" "Seeing the smile on your face when you're mentoring those young models," he laughed. "It's like you're giving them the support you always wished for." Tasha had tears welling up in her eyes. "And you, my lover, the way you've forgiven those who doubted us and utilized your achievement to inspire others. You inspire me every day." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Paul and Tasha clutched each other close. Their road had been fraught with difficulties, but their love had proven stronger than any obstacle. In that calm moment, surrounded by the peace of their hometown and the warmth of their enduring love, they felt genuinely fortunate. If you enjoyed the story of Paul and Tasha, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this. Click here to watch it.